It's early 97, and Square has just come off of releasing one of their best games yet, Final Fantasy VII, a game that would cause a tectonic shift in the industry both domestically and internationally for the company. After so many months and millions spent on crafting so many detailed and cutting-edge pre-rendered CG visuals, the big man, Sakaguchi, decides to open up a studio in Hawaii dedicated solely to working on these high-production computer-animated projects with additional help from their LA branch. The end goal was to obviously have that cinematic flair that could appeal to a larger, overseas crowd and land them a Hollywood deal. You already know that they ended up flying a bit too close to the sun with that one, but when they first started off, Sakaguchi expressed having a real want to work on something with a much more grounded tone, cooler setting, shocking themes and visuals, and an overall Western flair that would stand out from their more traditional lineup, resembling something closer to a movie or TV show. Revisiting a previously scrapped concept for FF7, a hard-boiled detective story taking place in New York, while giving it a modern twist, riding the wave of survival horror games, and a strategic business decision with Kadokawa's Horror Bunko label that focused on publishing all kinds of works that targeted the reader's most primal and psychological fears. By then, Parasite already had a well-received film adaptation, so it was decided that a project could serve as a loosely related sequel rather than retreading the same ground. Hideaki Sena, the book's original author, didn't really have any creative say in the project, but in later interviews he expressed that he was really surprised with the game on both a technical and narrative standpoint, excited with how they turned a cult horror hit into Square's first cinematic RPG. We open up on Christmas Eve in 1997. Our protag in black is Aya Brea, an NYPD cop trying to enjoy a night out with her date at Carnegie Hall. She seems a little tense, and you're able to feel it too with the quiet ambient audio and nothing but footsteps echoing as you make your way into the main theater. The play starts, and the moment Our Lady sings, the crowd starts bursting into flames and the scene turns into hell on earth. The direction and number of actors on screen is a marked improvement from anything we've seen from Square to this point, but I'd be silly to say it hasn't aged. Though rather than it being a blemish like in most cases, I think it often works in the game's favor. The low definition, stilted and jerky movement, and blurry textures work towards giving this game a more surreal and nightmarish impression as your brain fills the gaps of all the violence. This can especially be seen in a lot of the monster transformation scenes throughout the game. They're meticulous and graphic, with the camera never pulling away and instead zooming in on skin bursting open, appendages cracking, and blood pooling out like congealed viscera. This was their first M-rated game, and they were gonna make good use of that rating. After the theater catches fire and your first encounter with Eve, you make your way backstage and stumble across some of the actors' charred corpses. And the way one of them subtly twitches and groans in the state they're in never fails to make my fucking skin crawl. I kinda skipped over the combat for a minute because, I'm gonna be real with you, I don't really like it. I do appreciate how experimental and unconventional it is, it being an offshoot of the ATB system with a wider range for targeting and full control of your movement. It makes sense, as you'll be using guns for the entire run unless you recklessly mag dump on the wrong body part. My main gripe has to do with how some of these fights are framed, as they're all angled to whatever pre-rendered background you find yourself in. Sometimes isometric, sometimes top-down, sometimes front-facing, and with combat that demands you have proper placing and reflexes to dodge attacks, it can kinda fall apart when you have limited depth perception or movement is skewed. It sounds like a neat way to mix up the difficulty on paper, but in practice, it just results in really tedious encounters, especially in places like the sewer, because it ain't a Squaresoft RPG without a dogshit sewer level. Boss fights, on the other hand, just stick to the same isometric angle you see at the start of the game and don't really play with positioning outside of one exception in the hospital chapter. I feel like it's also a bit shallow mechanically and ultimately feels like a proof of concept of what can be explored with real-time turn-based combat. You mainly keep track of two meters, one being ATB and the other being PE. It's effectively your mana bar that slowly regenerates and lets you cast buffs, debuffs, or curse Kamehameha enemies with your freaking mind! Starting out, there's a lot of downtime as the ATB bar fills up where you're kinda just dicking around, but coming across weapon and armor upgrades can help you remedy this. If you're really impatient, you can also dump stats into speed, but you'd be missing out on dishing a lot of damage compared to just casting haste on occasion, which is where I think this game's true depth and replay value lies ultimately. Having bonus points you can put into your weapon's individual attributes on top of mod kits that let you fuck around with weapon fire rates and have a semi-auto grenade launcher, or maybe an acid-spewed shotgun with ridiculous spread. You can really do whatever you want when it comes to weapon crafting, and this is probably the first instance of a Square game where the new game plus run and post game is better than any of the encounters in the main story. Despite my issues with the combat, I really do appreciate the care and effort put into making each transition seamless and natural. Comparing this to another survival horror RPG like Kodelka, where combat and exploration feels so entirely removed it's almost like two separate games, Parasite Eve keeps a strict adherence to its presentation, never interrupting the flow of movement, combat, or exploration, even down to the fucking menu design. Finishing a fight and hearing that little gun cock as you strike a pose, see some stats, and resuming right where you left off feels so satisfying, even if it's really subtle. In fact, it does a lot of little things to enhance and immerse you in the experience, minus all the little stock sound effects. My favorite detail has to be the contrast of nerve-wracking ambience or complete diegetic silence I mentioned before, and the hypnotic trance music found around every corner. BGM legend and X's #1 fan,
Yoko, que es compositora, Yoko Shimomura,
flexes so hard on this soundtrack, solidifying her as one of the most versatile game composers up there with Sakuraba. When development shifted to the LA office and Shimomura was brought on board, staff would take her to see the nightclub scene at the time. This influence, coupled with the fact that she was feeling isolated and without a home, stressed from the project, and struggling to find the right approach for this game's sound, led her to experiment with a sound she described as inorganic, distant, and cold. It's a great success, cause this shit is fucking ice cold. Chopping up opera vocals using heart synth beats, frantic percussions and loops, it all resulted in something atypical from the epic battle themes or heart rhythmic techno you'd expect from any other game. Could be fate, could be chance, but her feelings and the art that came out of that point in time seem to mirror Aya's character beautifully. This girl suffers through so much as the curtains pull back, but she still remains stoic and nonchalant the entire time. Even when she loses her cool and drowning in agony, she's putting everyone in their place and looking hot while doing it. She's the mold of a prototypical action star that's slowly picked apart to reveal a deeply sorrowful and lost woman that still chooses to fight and protect others and ultimately find comfort and purpose in those around her. Call it cliche or predictable, but I think the game does more than enough exploring her character and creating an interesting conflict within herself and others in the short runtime it presents. I mean, it's the tagline for the game itself, for fuck's sake. I don't want to necro-post a decade-old debate about Aya's true character and intentions and if the sequels did her justice, but I do think this is the best portrayal of her, and it's all thanks to how restrained and limited her personality comes across while refusing to crack when put into a pressure cooker of emotions. Instead, using her misfortune and the suffering she's been put through as a weapon, literally and figuratively, to save the day. I won't go into details, both for the sake of spoilers and to not rob you such a short and poignant narrative with a shitty YouTube summary. I also don't want to go through the trouble of breaking down the intricate biological mechanics in the plot involving lots of... It's a very self-contained narrative running through only a handful of locations in NYC. That being said, it makes great use of each and every single location, giving it a real sense of place and that grounded vibe they were aiming for originally. From the cold and moody winter night in Central Park to the stark and dirty subways. They even nailed how much of a shithole Soho is. You can almost smell the skunkweed and homeless excrement through the CRT. It really drives home that dirty and run-down feel of the city while still having a grand sense of scale, even more pronounced with how empty and dark each place has become after evacuating everybody in the city. There's still a warm sense of life and comfort in the police precinct though. Some very odd camera choices, but the attention to detail with all the clutter, NPC dialogue, and trip-hop inspired beats makes it feel like a dedicated save hub you can always come back to at any moment. I also really like the little overworld map that lets you pan around and track random helicopters and boats as they go around the city, while listening to a catchy track that would be fitting while the bank puts you on hold for 5 hours because PayPal stole all my fucking commission money! It's a bit of a shame how, despite its RPG and survival horror influence, the game is pretty straightforward and linear with its dungeon designs. There's not much in the way of resource management unless you're playing like DSP. There were a few moments here and there where I did struggle to find where to go next, but it's mostly due to a lack of signposting for pickup items or doorways, which I find very odd seeing as how their last game already fixed this issue with the select button. They also go out of their way to hide good pickups behind places you'd never even think of checking, so I think it could be just a result of simple oversights and little playtesting. Even at the most glacial pace, you can still wrap up a playthrough in about 6 to 7 violent hours, while still offering a meaty post-game experience that could end up being your personal evil-ass rape dungeon if you don't prep enough by collecting literal junk and crafting this game's ultimate weapon back at base. Its short runtime, experimental gameplay, psychological horror, flashy visuals and aesthetics, cold music and atmosphere, and somber storytelling is something that'll stick with you long after you beat the game, driving you to madness as you plead your friends to give it a try as the perfect Christmas game. Second of Christmas nights, of course.